Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session of the Get Unstuck series with myself, Sarah Archer. I am a career and leadership coach, and I work with predominantly female leaders to advance their career, change their career if they're not enjoying it, or have more confidence and impact in their careers. And I created the Get Unstuck series to give you 15 minutes in your working week just to think about something career related to help you move the dial a little bit on your career. And there are always practical sessions around 15 minutes, and there's always things you can take away and put into practice straight away. So if you're joining me today, please do say hello, give me a little wave or a hello in the comments. It's always nice to know that people have managed to create that 15-minute slot for themselves to think about their careers. And if you've got questions or comments about the topic today, or things you want to share that could help other people, please do pop them into the comments. If you're watching on replay and you've got a question, just tag me into your question. I will come back and answer it later on. So today's topic is all about how to develop executive presence. And this is a big topic. So I'm going to cover what I can in 15 minutes, but also just to flag to you, I have a free ebook on how to develop powerful presence for female leaders. And I will put the link into the comments after the session so that you can download that if you want to have something to reflect on after the session to help you develop your executive presence. Please do take advantage of that. So how to develop executive presence and how it can increase your leadership impact is what we're going to be covering today. And, you know, executive presence is a term we hear a lot of, isn't it? But not everybody is clear about what do we actually mean by executive presence, sometimes also known as gravitas. And even when I was doing the prep today for the session, I came up with so many definitions. You know, it can feel overwhelming. So what I wanted to try and do for you today is just distill it a little bit to make it easier to kind of work out what's going to resonate for you. And thinking about it, for me, I felt that executive presence is being your best self powerfully. And that really kind of, for me, made sense of what executive presence is. But as I said, you know, you've got to come up with your own definition, because executive presence has to come from your sense of self and has to be authentic. Otherwise, it's just not going to chime with people. But, you know, for me, being your best self powerfully, being able to amplify your strengths is really kind of the foundation for executive presence. But let's think about why it's important that we have executive presence, because if you're going to spend time and energy investing in developing executive presence, we want to know there's going to be a benefit to doing that. So there is research that shows that it definitely contributes to your career advancement. So in America, the Center for Talent Innovation did some research amongst senior execs and revealed that executive presence makes up 26% of what senior leaders say it takes to get the next promotion. So that's quite a big chunk, isn't it? 26% of what you do to get that next promotion is down to your executive presence. So, you know, that's definitely worth thinking about in terms of if you are about to make a shift to your next role or your next internal role. You know, what's my executive presence saying about me? How's it contributing to that? But it's not just about career advancement, because it also plays a part in how you do your job, how you do your leadership role. Because if you're negotiating, if you're presenting, if you're pitching, if you're influencing, and if you're a leader, you're going to be doing all of those things. If you're engaging stakeholders, internally and externally, if you're engaging your team, inspiring them to perform well, your executive presence is going to contribute to all of those elements in your job. So, and also inspire confidence in decision makers internally and externally. So there's definitely two powerful reasons why we want to have strong executive presence. So let's just spend a little bit of time thinking about what it is. So obviously you've got my definition of being your best self powerfully, but there were two other definitions that I really liked as well. So one was having calm confidence, which I think is also very powerful. And also it being the synthesis of your outward behavior and your internal values, which speaks to your authenticity, doesn't it? So, if your internal values are driving your outward behavior, then, that should lead to strong executive presence. But it's not going to be that simple, because there's lots and lots of different elements as well that contribute to executive presence. So just a few of them I'm going to throw at you. Again, it's going to vary from person to person. So it's thinking about which ones resonate for you. But things like passion and positive energy for your message, for your cause, for your purpose. It's that sense of not being worried if you don't have all the answers. So showing up, not feeling like you have to know everything and be able to give all the answers to any question that's thrown at you. That sort of curiosity and always being open to learning, not feeling again that you have to know everything, that there is still room for growth. Obviously kind of commanding respect, commanding trust, actively listening and empowering people. Body language is also important in executive presence. So that sort of relaxed body language, strong eye contact, leaning in, actively listening, smiling, being open, being sort of at ease in your own skin is something that often comes up when people talk about executive presence. That sort of poise under pressure, knowing you can cope with anything that happens. That professional appearance, and we'll talk a bit more about that as well, but also being an effective communicator. So, confident language, storytelling, and engaging people. So, there's a lot there, isn't there? So thinking about kind of what resonates for you can be really helpful, because you want to be able to define your own version of executive presence, because that will obviously help you cultivate what's important for you. So there's a couple of things you can do to help with that. And obviously this is something I work a lot with my clients, defining their executive presence. So these things definitely work. So the first thing would be to think about, who do you know who's got it? So, if you're listening live now, you could write down the name of that person. Who is it when you think about executive presence, you really feel they kind of exude it? And then write down, what are the traits that they have? What are the behaviors? What do they exhibit that signifies executive presence to you? What is their kind of way of being? Because this will allow you to access two things by doing this little exercise. So the first thing is you'll be unpacking what you already have, because it could be that you are noticing the behaviors, the traits, the qualities that kind of mirror in that person what you have already. Or you're recognizing what you aspire to have. So what resonates with you that you want to have in terms of executive presence. So it's a really powerful exercise. And I had one client who I worked with around this, and what she did is, when she identified that person who really kind of exuded executive presence for her, she then actually said, could she have a chat with that person? They had I think it was a virtual coffee, because I think we were in COVID at this point. They had a virtual coffee, and she just, reflected that she felt that person had executive presence, and she was curious about how she went about developing it. And for that person, it was really flattering for them to hear that she felt that they had executive presence, and they had a really great conversation about how to develop executive presence. So you could take it to that next level of also talking to that person about their journey to develop executive presence. So that's the first thing you could do. The second thing is to work out what you currently have in the way of executive presence. So you can do a bit of a self-assessment to just try and understand, how am I showing up now? When I'm going to meetings, if I'm presenting, if I'm in a situation where I've got to influence or negotiate or motivate, what am I doing that signifies I have executive presence already. And then you could ask for feedback, because obviously your self-assessment can only go so far, particularly around something like executive presence. So you can ask somebody that you trust, that you recognise would be able to give you valuable feedback around how you're coming across. So I had another client, a different client, where we were working on this, and she had a presentation to the board coming up. And so she identified one of her colleagues was going to be at that board meeting. She identified they'd be a great person. She trusted them to really just notice what she was doing in terms of inspiring trust, communicating well, all of those things. So she was quite specific. She asked them if they'd be willing to give her feedback. She was quite specific about what she wanted to get from that feedback. And it was incredibly valuable for her, because it had helped her identify what she was already doing really well and what some of the gaps were that she could work on. So that can then feed into your self-assessment, because in your self-assessment, you want to be identifying the positives, what am I doing well already, and then what the gaps might be. And, you do want to then also be thinking about your personal leadership brand, because your executive presence obviously needs to reflect your leadership brand. So really understanding what are my kind of unique elements in my leadership brand that will help amplify my executive presence, and vice versa. So your executive presence will amplify your leadership brand, and your leadership brand will amplify your executive presence. So you can also do some work around what your leadership brand is, and that's something I do again a lot with my clients. So that reflective piece is really powerful and really important part of developing your executive presence. Because the great news is that it's a skill. It can be learnt. There are people who have it probably more naturally, shall we say. They tend to be very charismatic, magnetic personalities. And sometimes when we see those people in action, we can think, well, you've either got it or you haven't. But actually, you can develop it. So just because you might feel currently my executive presence isn't where I'd like it to be, that's not going to be a fixed state. You can develop it, which is the great news. So the first thing to say around developing it is that we want to just be really present, and even just showing up for this session and thinking about executive presence, doing the reflective piece, is just going to bring it more into your consciousness around how you are showing up and what you are doing that is working and what you want to try and amplify. And obviously with anything, you don't want to try and do to fill all your gaps at the once. You're going to pick off what am I going to work on first, what am I going to focus on first, rather than trying to do everything, so that you can really embed that element that you're going to be focusing on. Because what you want to be alongside being present is also being really intentional. So say you've got a meeting or a presentation or a one-to-one where you really want to have impact. It's going into that situation, being really intentional about what you want to do. And also being willing to experiment and maybe fail and learn and grow when you are trying out different aspects of increasing your executive presence. So it might be you're going into that meeting and you're going to think about, okay, I'm going to really focus on my body language in this meeting. I'm going to be really thinking about, how open I am, how I'm demonstrating my active listening, my eye contact, my smiling. So it might be around kind of body language that you want to exude a more executive presence. It might be around language. You want to maybe practice more storytelling or engagement, or maybe more confident language in that particular scenario. So it's just being really intentional about how you want to use that particular experience to enhance your executive presence. And then it's about reviewing it afterwards. So you've had the meeting, you're just going to do a reflective piece of what went well. What did I do that I'd like to do again? What would I change next time? So that you're embedding what's going on for you that's working, and you're changing perhaps what's not working. So that's the first thing to do. Then the other thing you can do is just to kind of spend more time with the people who you feel are already exuding executive presence, because it's just about kind of raising your game a bit more by mirroring, but also just allowing yourself to go to that next level, to up level into the leader that you really want to be. And if you play sport, you will know that if you're playing against a competitor who's better than you, that is going to enable you to raise your game. So if you've got peers around you who you feel are really kind of, delivering on executive presence, spending more time with them, noticing what they're doing, trying things for yourself is going to be really powerful. Then the third thing to do is to consider your image and how you dress and what you might want to change up to signify that you have more executive presence. So, unfortunately, we still visually judge people when we meet them. That initial impact is how they're appearing to us. So we do want to think about what would make me feel good and that would signify that I have executive presence. So it's not about wearing a power suit. It's not about changing dramatically how you're dressing. It is about just noticing what's going to make you feel good. So I had one client who, when she was working in a very male-dominated industry and organization, and for her, she wanted something that would signify that she was going into a meeting being her best self powerfully. And for her, and again, it's a very personal choice, it was putting on red lipstick. And that for her signified, right, I'm going into this meeting and I'm going to be me, but my best me. But it could be a particular color that you wear. It could be a statement piece of jewelry or a scarf or something. It could be about putting on a jacket. I know when I was very early in my career, my boss at the time said to me, "Sarah, lose the cardigan." And I was like, "What do you mean lose the cardigan?" But I did, and it was in the 90s. I did then put a jacket on instead of the cardigan. And for me, actually, it did just up level my confidence at that point in my career. But I'm not saying, you have to go and buy a jacket or whatever. It's just about doing something that makes you feel good and kind of, allows you to use your appearance to your advantage. And then the other thing I just want to kind of flag to you, two more things really, is to not be tempted to keep a low profile. There are going to be times when we're feeling perhaps low energy, or perhaps just can't be bothered, or, I don't feel like I've got very much to contribute in this meeting. Maybe I just won't say anything. I'm not feeling it today. But just to try and avoid those scenarios, so you're consistently delivering executive presence. So, when you're tempted to keep a low profile, really being intentional about not keeping a low profile and making sure you're contributing, making sure you're showing up and you're being visible in that meeting. Particularly if they're virtual meetings, where sometimes if you're not contributing, you can disappear from the screen. So, if you think about meetings that you're in, you're going to remember the person who looks energetic, who's showing interest, who's contributing in some way to that meeting. So be that person. But obviously this all takes energy, so it's also about balancing your energy and making sure you are filling your cup whilst you're putting more energy into developing your executive presence. Because the other thing you also want to be doing is thinking about your visibility strategy, which you should have if you're a leader as well, and making sure that your executive presence is coming through in your internal and external visibility strategy as well. So let's just do a little, summary of what you can do. And obviously there's lots more you can do, but I don't want to overwhelm you. So think about what definition resonates for you. Think about who's doing it. That signifies executive presence to you. Do a little self-assessment. What are you doing well? What could the gaps be for you? Can I get some feedback? And then think about opportunities where you can be more intentional, where you can bring your consciousness around executive presence to bear, and you can try out different ways of increasing your executive presence. And my final kind of message to you is just to be powerfully you. And don't forget, I'm going to put a link into the comments if you want to download my free resource, which is 5 steps to creating powerful presence as a female leader. Please do that. And as always, if you need support around this area, do send me a direct message. We can have a chat about developing executive presence for you in your current role. And I will see you back here next Wednesday at 12:15 for another leadership and career topic in the Get Unstuck series. In the meantime, have a wonderful week.